I don't mind it though. Never have. There's something about winter that makes you think. The dark evenings, the quiet streets, the way the world sort of slows down. Summer is noise and movement and everyone pretending to be happy. Winter is honest. Winter doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. And today I want to talk about something honest, something I carried inside me for most of my life without realizing it, something that sat in my chest like a stone for decades, until one afternoon about a year ago, when the stone finally cracked open and I understood what was inside it. My father never told me he loved me, not once, not a single time in 63 years, and for most of my life, I thought that meant he didn't. My dad's name was Arthur Whitfield, born in 1937 in Knowle West, which is a part of Bristol that wasn't exactly known for producing poets and philosophers. It was a working-class estate, terraced houses, factories, men who left school at 14 and went straight to work and didn't complain about it because complaining wasn't something you did. Arthur was one of those men. He worked at the tobacco factory on East Street for 41 years. 41 years in the same building, same shift pattern, same walk to work every morning, 22 minutes, rain or shine, because the bus was a luxury he didn't believe in. He was a big man, my dad. Not tall, but wide, thick arms, hands like shovels, a face that looked like it had been carved out of something hard and left in the weather for too long. He had this permanent expression, not angry exactly, but serious, like the world was a problem he was trying to solve and he hadn't quite figured it out yet. He didn't talk much, not about feelings, not about fears, not about anything that couldn't be solved with a spanner or fixed with a bit of common sense. When I was growing up, our conversations went like this. "All right, Dad. All right, son." That was it. That was the whole thing. 2 words each, and then back to whatever we were doing. Him reading the paper, me doing homework, the television on in the corner. My mum, Jean, filling the silence for both of us, because God knows we weren't going to fill it ourselves. I want you to understand something. He wasn't cruel. I need to say that clearly, because when I tell people my dad never said he loved me, they assume he was some kind of monster. He wasn't. He never hit me, never shouted at me, never belittled me or made me feel worthless. He was there, every day. He came home from work, he sat at the table, he ate what my mum put in front of him, he watched the news, and he went to bed. Next morning, same thing, for 41 years. He provided. That was his word. I provide. As if that explained everything. As if putting a roof over our heads and food on the table was a complete sentence that didn't need anything after it. And for a long time, I accepted that. Because that's what men did, wasn't it? Especially men from his generation. Men who grew up with fathers who'd been through the war. Men who were raised on the principle that emotions were a luxury you couldn't afford. That love was something you showed by not leaving, by turning up, by staying. But when you're a boy, 8, 9, 10 years old, you don't understand that. You don't understand the economics of love. You just know that your dad has never looked you in the eye and said those 3 words, and you start to wonder if there's something wrong with you. I remember one specific day. I was about 9. It was winter, February, I think, cold like today. I'd come home from school and I'd been in a fight, not a proper fight, a playground scuffle. Some lad called me something. I pushed him, he pushed me back, and I ended up on the ground with a bloody nose and a ripped coat. I walked through the front door with blood on my lip and mud on my trousers. My mum nearly had a heart attack. She was fussing around me with a wet cloth, asking me what happened, who did it. Was I okay? My dad was sat in his chair by the fire. He looked up from his paper, looked at me, looked at the blood, looked at the coat, and he said, "Did you hit him back?" I said, "Yeah." He nodded once, then went back to his paper. That was it. "No, are you all right, son? No, come here, let me look at that. No arm around the shoulder, just... Did you hit him back?" And my mum gave him this look. I remember it. this look that said 1,000 things she would never say out loud in front of me. And he didn't look up, he just turned the page. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling and thought, why doesn't he care? But that's the thing, isn't it? He did care. I know that now. That nod. That single nod. That was his version of, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. But a 9-year-old can't read that. A 9-year-old needs the words. As I got older, I stopped waiting for them. You adapt, don't you? You learn to live without the thing you need by convincing yourself you don't need it. And eventually, you start to become the thing you adapted to. By the time I was 20, I was already turning into him. I could feel it, the silence, the distance, the way I'd rather fix a tap than have a conversation about how I was feeling. I met Margaret when I was 24, and she noticed it straight away. She's clever like that. Within about 3 months of us being together, she said, George, do you know you never talk about your dad? I said, what's there to talk about? He's my dad. He goes to work. He comes home. That's it. She said, that's not it though, is it? I didn't answer, because she was right and I didn't want to admit it. My dad retired in 1998. He was 61. I remember going to visit him about a month after he'd finished at the factory, and it was strange. He was sat in the same chair, same spot by the window, but he looked different, smaller somehow, like the job had been holding him upright, and without it, he'd started to deflate. My mum said he wasn't sleeping well, said he'd get up at 4 in the morning out of habit and just sit in the kitchen in the dark because he didn't know what else to do. 41 years of purpose, and then nothing. I tried to talk to him about it. I said, Dad, why don't you join a club or something? Bowls, fishing, anything. He looked at me like I'd suggested he take up ballet. I'm fine, he said. There's that word again. Fine. The word men use when they're drowning, but don't want to make a fuss. Over the next few years, I watched him shrink. Not physically, he was still a big man. But the life went out of him, bit by bit. He stopped reading the paper, stopped watching the news, stopped caring about the things he used to get angry about. My mum would talk to him, and he'd just nod. Not the firm nod I remembered from my childhood. A hollow one. Like he was agreeing to something he hadn't heard. I should have done more, I know that. I should have pushed harder, sat with him longer, made him talk. But I was busy. I had the business. I had the kids. I had my own life that was moving too fast for me to stop and notice that my dad was disappearing right in front of me. You always think there's more time with your parents. You think they'll just be there, like a building, like a mountain, permanent, unchanging. They're not. My dad had a stroke in 2009, a bad one, left side. He lost the use of his left arm and most of his speech. Most of his speech. Think about that for a second. A man who already barely spoke, losing the ability to speak at all. I went to see him in the hospital. He was lying in this narrow bed with tubes and machines and that awful strip lighting that makes everyone look half dead. My mum was sat next to him, holding his hand, talking to him about the garden as if nothing had happened. That's how she coped. She just kept talking, filling the silence like she'd been doing for 50 years. I sat on the other side and I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I saw him. Not the big man in the chair, not the silent provider, not the nod instead of a hug. I saw him, an old man, scared, in a hospital bed, with nothing left to hide behind. His right hand was resting on the blanket, and I did something I hadn't done since I was about 5 years old. I reached over and I held it. His hand was still big, still rough, still the same hand that had built shelves and fixed engines and gripped a lunchbox every morning for 41 years. But it was trembling, and he looked at me, right at me, and his eyes were wet. He tried to say something. His mouth moved, but the words wouldn't come. Whatever the stroke had taken from him, it had taken the words he'd never used anyway. And now that he might have finally wanted to say them, he couldn't. I leaned in. I said, "It's all right, Dad, you don't have to say anything." And he squeezed my hand, hard, so hard it almost hurt. And in that squeeze, I heard everything he'd never said. He passed away 3 weeks later, February the 14th, 2009, Valentine's Day, which is a strange kind of irony for a man who never used the word love. At the funeral, my mum gave me a box, a small wooden box that had been in the back of his wardrobe for as long as anyone could remember. She said, "Your dad wanted you to have this. He told me years ago." I took it home, sat at the kitchen table, opened it. Inside, there were newspaper clippings, about 15 of them, yellow, creased, some of them barely holding together. Every single one was about me. A tiny article from the local paper when my business won a small trade award in 2001. A mention in a community newsletter about a charity job I did for a church in 2004. A clipping from when I'd been quoted in some industry magazine about plumbing regulations, the most boring article you could imagine. He'd cut them all out carefully with scissors and kept them in a box in his wardrobe for years. There was one more thing in the box, a photograph. Me, aged about 6, sat on his shoulders at some fair or carnival. I'm laughing. My arms are stretched out like I'm flying, and he's looking up at me, and he's smiling, a proper, full, unguarded smile, the kind of smile I don't think I ever saw in person. On the back of the photo, in his handwriting, just 2 words. My boy. I sat at that kitchen table and I cried, not quietly, not the way men are supposed to cry, a single tear, a stiff upper lip, very dignified. No, I cried like a child, the kind of crying where your whole body shakes and you can't breathe and you don't care who hears you. Margaret came in and she didn't say anything. She just stood behind me and put her arms around me and let me fall apart. Because I finally understood, he did love me. He loved me desperately. He loved me so much that he cut out boring newspaper articles and kept them in a box like they were treasures. He loved me so much that he carried a photo of me on his shoulders for decades. He loved me enough to squeeze my hand so hard it hurt, because that squeeze was carrying the weight of 60 years of words he couldn't say. He just didn't know how to say it. Nobody taught him. His father didn't say it. His father's father didn't say it. It was a chain. Generation after generation of men who loved their sons fiercely, silently, invisibly. Men who thought providing was the same as loving. Men who thought staying was the same as saying. And by the time he might have wanted to break that chain, a stroke stole the words from his mouth, and 3 weeks later he was gone. Here's why I'm telling you this. I have 3 children, James, Sarah, and Daniel. And I swore to myself, sat at that kitchen table with tears on my face and a wooden box in my hands. I swore that the chain stops with me. I tell them I love them now, every time I see them, every phone call, every visit. I say it out loud, with words, not a nod, not a squeeze. Words. It felt ridiculous at first, embarrassing, very un-George. The first time I said it to James on the phone, there was this pause and he said, "Are you all right, Dad? Are you ill?" That tells you everything, doesn't it? My son heard me say, "I love you," and assumed I was dying, but I kept saying it. And eventually they stopped being surprised. And now, it's just what we do. It's normal. It's easy. 3 words that cost nothing and mean everything. I think about my dad a lot, especially in winter, especially on cold days like this when the sky is grey and the streets are quiet and everything feels a bit still. I think about him walking to work in the dark at 5:30 in the morning. Frost on the pavement, hands in his pockets, breath like smoke in the air. 41 years of those mornings. 41 years of choosing to get out of a warm bed and walk 22 minutes in the cold so that his family could have heating and food and a roof. That is love. I know that now. That walk, that cold, dark, thankless walk. That was his love letter, written in footsteps instead of words, every single morning. He just never learned to say it any other way. If your father never told you he loved you, I want you to consider the possibility that he did, in ways you didn't recognize, in ways that didn't look like love, because nobody taught you what love looks like when it comes from a man who was never taught how to show it. Look for the box in the wardrobe, not a literal box, but the thing he did that you dismissed. The overtime he worked, the time he drove 2 hours to pick you up when your car broke down and didn't complain once, the way he stood at the back of the room at your wedding with his hands clasped and his jaw tight because he was trying not to cry. That's the box, that's the clippings, that's the photograph with 2 words on the back. And if you're a father yourself, I'm begging you, don't make your children search for it. Don't make them wait until you're gone to find a box in a wardrobe and finally understand. Say it now, today, while your mouth still works, while they can still hear you, while it's a Tuesday evening and nothing special is happening, and that's exactly what makes it matter. Tell them. Because my dad squeezed my hand in that hospital bed so hard it almost broke my fingers, and I would give anything, everything, to go back to that moment and hear him say the words instead. But I can't, so I say them for him, every day, to my kids, to Margaret, to anyone who needs to hear them. I love you. There, that wasn't so hard, was it? I'm George, I'm 64. It's cold outside and it's getting dark early, but inside this house, it's warm, and that's enough.